Okay, let's take a look at the Calgary real estate market and see what's happening. So the first thing you need to know is that to understand the property market, you have to look at supply and demand. And the great news is we've got really good data and proxies for both supply and demand. So let's dive right into the data here. So we're looking at City of Calgary and all residential listings. So they could be detached homes, apartments, townhouses, any residential home. And let's first look at new listings here. So these are new homes that have been listed each month of the year. And what I've got here is the line for 2018 in purple, 2019 in green, and 2020 in blue. And the first thing you notice is that new listings tend to follow a pretty seasonal pattern. So they're generally more new listings in the spring and summer months, and then fewer new listings as the year goes on. And if you look at 2020, obviously a very unusual year, right in March and April and May, there were far fewer new listings than there would normally be as a result of COVID-19, of course. So a big gap opening up here in the spring and summer 2020. But then since then, new listings have been closer to normal. Still generally down, so still generally fewer new listings than you'd normally see, but a bit closer to normal. So if we take a look in November 2020, listings down 8%. So that's new supply. Then if we look at demand, the perfect proxy for demand is the number of sales per month. And again, this generally follows a very similar seasonal pattern. But in 2020, a very different year, big drop in sales, March, April, May, and then a recovery, and actually a very strong recovery, June, July, August, and for the rest of the year. So sales have been typically higher in the last 5 months than for that time of year. In November, for example, sales up 24% versus the average of the 2 previous years. So sales have been really strong. So strong demand and not a lot of new listings coming to the market means that the overall inventory or the overall number of listings is actually quite a bit lower than it normally would be. So inventory is what we call this, the total number of listings available for sale, which is a perfect proxy for the total supply in the market. And you can see here in November 2020, it's down about 20% of what it would normally be. So right now there's roughly 5,000 properties available for sale in the city of Calgary. So not a lot of supply. And if we take a look at months of supply, which is the total inventory divided by the total number of sales in the previous month. So this is telling you how many months would it take in order to sell through all of the homes that are currently listed. And the answer here in Calgary is about 3.7 months. So if no more homes were listed going forwards, it would take 3.7 months to clear all of the homes that are currently listed. So this gives you a picture here of what months of supply normally looks like and how it looks in 2020. So there's on balance less supply and more demand, which means this metric of months of supply is lower than it normally would be. So when months of supply are low like this, that generally creates more favorable conditions for sellers and generally supports better prices. So it creates more favorable conditions for sellers, less favorable conditions for buyers. So a lot of people would often think that the winter would be a bad time to be listed. But right now, given the fact that there's less supply and still strong demand, it's not a bad time to be listed. And if you're a buyer, what this means is you've got less inventory, less homes to choose from when you're doing your search. And the homes that are there, many of them are selling faster. So you have to be a little quicker to your viewings and have to be quicker to getting offers in as well. So that's how it all looks at an overall level. But now if we dig into the different property types, and let's first look at detached homes. Detached homes have been performing by far the best in Calgary over the last number of months. And no surprise there, given COVID-19 and people wanting more space at home. So here you can see the number of new listings down quite a bit in November, so not a lot of new supply coming to the market. Sales have been incredibly strong, so up 28% in November 2020 versus the average of the 2 previous years. Overall inventory is very low, down 31% of where it normally is. So there's only 2,200 or so homes, detached homes listed for sale at the moment. And months of supply, again, very low, down at just 2.5 months of supply. So if you're selling a detached home right now in Calgary, hopefully you've got strong interest. You'll have lots of interested buyers, lots of showings. And if you're trying to buy a detached home right now in Calgary, you really have to be quick to the punch. If we take a look at apartments, number of new listings has actually been quite high relative to the overall market. So there's been a lot of new listings of apartments coming on, particularly in the last 3 months, which means supply is going up a little bit. And again, because of demand not being that strong in the apartment sector, it's actually down 1% in November versus the average of the previous 2 years. That means that inventory is actually higher than it normally would be for this time of year. So far less inventory of detached homes, but far more inventory of apartments. And all of that together makes for difficult conditions for selling apartments. So sellers of apartments right now have to be very sharp with their pricing, and buyers really have a huge amount of choice with a lot of listings on the market. And finally, attached homes. So that could be a townhouse or a row property. New listings here have generally been down in the last few months versus average, and sales, again, very strong. So as strong as detached home sales in many months recently, which means inventory, again, low for attached homes, and months of supply also looking more favorable for sellers, not quite as favorable as detached homes, and less favorable for buyers. But that's, even looking at the data on this level, is still a little bit too high level for buyers and sellers who are looking at their own specific communities and who need to look at their own property class and their own price band. So what we always recommend is that you'd go and take a look at the specifics for your area. And here at Bōde, we give you free access to all the data you need. So if you go on our website, bodecanada.com, you'll find we've got all of the market data for Alberta, so you can see what's on the market and what's recently sold. You can look at the exact same supply and demand dynamics and see trends and pricing. You can also look up the sold price of any individual home that's sold in Alberta over the last 10 years and see the details for that, how long it was on the market, exactly what features that home had. And the final tool we make available is our comparables tool. So here you're able to enter the specific features of a home, like the square footage, number of beds, number of baths, the amount of parking. And what we'll do is we'll return the most comparable live listings and the most comparable recently sold homes, so you can get a really good feel for what your home might be worth. So go check out those tools. You can find them all on bodecanada.com, and look out for our next monthly report next month.